Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is John Hardie, the Deputy Director of the FDD's Russia program. John, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
There was a really interesting investigation out of 60 Minutes over the weekend. The report suggested a Russian intelligence unit was behind a mysterious neurological illness known as Havana Syndrome. It's affected hundreds of U.S. officials worldwide. What do you make of the findings here?
Well, I agree. It's a fascinating report. It's especially interesting because our own intelligence community has concluded that the so-called Havana Syndrome was not the work of a foreign adversary. And obviously, the new report contradicts that finding. To my mind, I think there's still a lot we don't know. It's hard to say whether the new evidence really would overturn the intelligence community's finding, but I think it definitely gives them something new to chew on. In particular, the news that this GRU unit, known for sabotage and assassination, was lurking around the U.S. government personnel, I think is cause for alarm in and of itself, regardless of what they exactly were doing in terms of microwave weapons or acoustic weapons, things like that.
The findings of this, as you noted, are the exact opposite of an intelligence report from the United States that was found a year ago. It found that foreign adversary involvement was very unlikely. So what do you think is most surprising to you as you hear this now a year later?
Well, I would just go back to this GRU unit. They're known for example, chemical warfare, assassinations, blowing things up in various different countries. In other words, this is not your ordinary spy team. These are guys who are tasked with what the Russians call active measures, which can include and often does include assassination. So something like this is certainly not outside their wheelhouse, and we know the Russians have at least researched these types of weapons in the past.
I want to read you a quote from Greg Edgreen. He's a retired Army lieutenant colonel who led the Pentagon investigation into what now is known as Havana Syndrome. And he said this on 60 Minutes. And he said this about the officials who were impacted specifically. Quote, consistently there was a Russia nexus. There was some angle where they had worked against Russia, focused on Russia, and done extremely well. As an expert on Russia, do you think Russia was responsible? What do you make of this?
I'm going to have to give you the unsatisfying answer that I don't know. It certainly wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, this sort of thing is squarely within the Russians' MO, and particularly for this unit mentioned in the report. I don't think there's any definitive evidence one way or the other, and I do give a considerable weight to the intelligence community's finding, given that they have information that we're not privy to in the public.
Do you think then, though, that this report indicates at all that the U.S. can't adequately defend or protect its citizens from Russia?
Well, I think the sheer number of U.S. officials that are suffering from this illness, I think, is certainly cause for alarm. And if it is caused by a foreign adversary, I think that does give us pause that this has been happening for years. And actually, according to the report, even before the intelligence community was apparently aware, I think the earliest reported instance in the IC's finding was 2016. And here we have reports of attacks as early as 2014. So it may be that there's information that our intelligence community was not fully aware of, and perhaps they'll take a second look at the evidence given the new information.
Obviously, there is tension between the U.S. and Russia right now. Do you think that this report does anything to worsen that?
Well, I think what this report does is it's sort of it fits within the pattern of these long string of incidents, Russian assassinations in the UK and elsewhere in Europe. I mean, this sort of thing, like I said, is not at all out of step with what the Russians do. So unfortunately, I don't think U.S.-Russia relations can sink much lower, short of direct armed conflict, but it certainly doesn't help.
I do want to read another quote from that retired Army lieutenant colonel. He said this in 60 Minutes, quote, there are no barriers on what Moscow will do, on who they will attack, and that if we don't face this head on, the problem is going to get worse. You said that our relations can't sink much lower. So what does getting worse look like? What, in your opinion, what could be worse?
So I think one thing the Russians could do is try to launch disruptive or destructive cyber attacks against U.S. infrastructure. They could also direct Russian cyber criminal groups to do the same. I mean, obviously, those groups do plenty of that already, although it's usually ransomware where they're trying to get money rather than just cause chaos. But I think there are a number of things the Russians could do short of conventional armed conflict.
And when it comes to this report, when it comes to U.S.-Russia relations, as the expert in this space, do you think anything's missing from the national dialogue, the international dialogue even?
Well, I would just turn our attention, especially the attention of the U.S. Congress, back to the needs to support Ukraine. I mean, obviously, it's not directly related to the so-called Havana Syndrome, but this is the epicenter of the U.S.-Russia confrontation. I think arming Ukraine is vital, not only from a moral standpoint, but it's squarely within our own national interest to do so. It's an investment in our security, and I do hope that the House and Speaker Mike Johnson will take up this aid package for Ukraine as soon as possible.
The retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, who I keep quoting, I'm going to quote him one more time because I think these are important questions he raised, and I would love to get your take on them. He said he believed both the Trump and Biden administrations set the bar of proof of the use of Havana or Russia's involvement, rather, in Havana Syndrome, quote, so high because we did not, as a country and a government, want to face hard truths. And he listed the hard truths as these questions. Quote, can we secure America? Are these massive counterintelligence failures? Can we protect American soil and our people on American soil? Are we being attacked? And if we're being attacked, is that an act of war? What do you think the answers to these questions are?
They're very good questions. I think, I can't speak to exactly how the U.S. government personnel pursuing this investigation set their standard of proof, but I will say that, our military forces are, while they're very capable, there are certain things that are just hard to deter through conventional military force. This sort of thing being one of them. It's why this is such a problem, not only with respect to Russia, but Iran, China, where you have adversaries doing these things under the threshold of conventional war, and they're just hard to deter because maybe they're doing it through proxies in the case of Iran, or they're just things that you don't want to get into a real war over. So they kind of fall below that threshold, and unfortunately, there's usually not a great way to stop them.
We've seen the Russia-Ukraine war surpass 2 years. We're seeing a battle in Congress over continued Ukraine aid. What's on your radar? What are you looking out for next when it comes to this conflict, when it comes to U.S.-Russia relations?
Well, I think the supplemental Ukraine aid bill is absolutely vital. I think the Ukrainians, in many respects, are running on fumes with regard to especially artillery ammunition, which is really vital to the way both sides wage war. I think without U.S. support, Ukraine will really be in a tough spot as the year progresses, and that could coincide in a very bad way with Russia's own efforts to generate more forces and likely launch another offensive sometime this year in Ukraine. I'm looking at Ukraine's own political will to mobilize and to a greater extent, including young men. That's a tough decision they haven't taken so far, but will likely need to take to hang in there with Russia.
Some Republican lawmakers I've talked to said language like this is fear-mongering, that America has their own problems to worry about domestically before we're helping, additionally, other countries. What do you say to that type of response?
Well, I would repeat what I said earlier. This is not just charity, it's an investment in American security. We're not only dealing body blows to our second greatest adversary, we're promoting stability and deterrence in Europe. We're promoting deterrence against China and any other bad actor that might want to take a bite out of their neighbor by force. So I don't think this is charity. I think not doing this will invite more aggression, more instability, which is bad for our security, it's bad for our economy, and the whole range of things. So I do hope that folks in Congress will kind of get their head on straight and do what they should have done many, many months ago.
And what do you think will happen then? Let's say Russia does win this war against Ukraine. What does that look like?
Right. So it depends on what that victory would entail. If they're, say, taking a little bit more territory in the eastern Donbass region, I think you could maybe see some sort of simmering conflict for a few more years, and then maybe Putin tries again. If Western support just collapses and the Ukrainian defense follows soon after, I think, and Russia is able to push into Western Ukraine, I mean that has serious, even more serious implications for NATO security, especially for the members of the eastern flank of the alliance. You could see many Russian units kind of pushed up on that western part of Ukraine, which would necessitate a response from us. Oh, and by the way, we still have to deal with a rise in China and a looming crisis over Taiwan. So it only means more resources sucked into Europe at a time when we really need to try to focus as much as we can on China. So that's just another reason why we need to be proactive and again, investing in our own security by aiding Ukraine.
John Hardie, thank you so much for your insights today. You're welcome back anytime.
Okay, thanks for having me.